Hello. Anybody out there? Drop a name, drop a hi, a smiley face, a wave. I'm always trying to get the light right. All right, so good evening. I'm Candace Moore, and I'm going to be talking tonight about culturally relevant pedagogy. I'm just going to interchangeably use culturally relevant and culturally responsive. Um, I think that for the purposes of the conversation today, those are the same thing. And I'm going to do a little overview and then kind of lean into where it hits in AP Lit. But a lot of these things that I'm going to be saying are applicable everywhere. So let's get going. So the first thing, of course, as always, if you're not following Teach Fiveable and Think Fiveable on every social media platform, don't know what you're doing with your life. So do that. I like to put Teach Fiveable on when I'm talking to teachers or have designed this to be for teachers because I don't want you to forget that there's a whole community for us in addition to the one for students. Upcoming for AP Lit tomorrow night. Sorry, no dates. Tomorrow night, there's a literary device review. That's tomorrow, Thursday, September 5th. Next week, I'm going to, on Wednesday, talk about creating a short fiction boot camp. That's going to be awesome. It's going to be talking about the big understandings from the College Board and how to fit those into a kind of preview of the course. And then on next Thursday, Nadiria Wade's going to be talking to students about annotating for analysis. And that's going to be that foundational piece. So that's going to be great for everyone, whether you have annotated for years, whether you still haven't figured out annotation at all, or it's a completely foreign beast to you. Your teacher keeps telling you, and you're like, I don't know what, I don't know where, I don't know why. So that's, again, next Wednesday and Thursday, the 11th and 12th. Boot camp on Wednesday, annotating on Thursday. So today's agenda is super simple. I'm just going to talk about culturally relevant pedagogy in general, talk about kind of its roots and criteria. Talk about what it's not really quickly because that can get a little tangly, and then kind of try to get down to and the practicality of it and talk about what exactly you might do in your classroom or in your life to tap into that and see what people are doing and be responsive to who they are. So, so the first thing is this quote from an article called "But That's Just Good Teaching: The Case for Culturally Relevant Pedagogy," which is a title that I love because I think it is. I think sometimes when it feels heavy to think about cultural pedagogy, to think about being responsive to the cultures of the students in the room, but it's really just good teaching. It's really not that different in its principles or in its application from differentiation, from building community, from all these things that most effective teachers are trying to do. I think that to put a name on it makes people not only generate some money for some people, but also, makes people feel a little overwhelmed at the idea of it. But I want to kind of break that down today. I kind of want to look at how it's really just not true. It's not some great big burden to you, or shouldn't be, or it doesn't have to be. So the quote from Gloria Ladson-Billings, who's kind of the, CRP godmother, is, "I have defined cultural relevant teaching as a pedagogy of opposition, not unlike a critical pedagogy, but specifically committed to collective, not merely individual empowerment. Culturally relevant pedagogy rests on 3 criteria or propositions." I'm going to dive into these. Students must experience academic success. Students must develop and or maintain cultural competence. And students must develop a critical consciousness through which they challenge the status quo of the current social order. So these are the 3 that ABC. I think it's really easy to break down what those might look like. And again, it's really not that different than what you're doing. If you're coming in, say hi or don't. It's all good. So moving through those things. So the first criteria, academic success. Obviously, this is what we're all trying to do in our classrooms. We're trying to have success. And I think the more powerful you're trying to be in your classroom, the more impact you're trying to have. Your success is not going to be only academic, but that is kind of one of the foundations. So the idea is that the success that you're creating is a success based on student engagement and investment, and that it's a collective achievement. So that not only are you being responsive to the cultures that are in your classroom, but you're creating a culture of the classroom. And that culture is about collective achievement, about collective success, and about collective learning. And so a really important part of that is meeting students as individuals. So again, this is what we're trying to do, right? We're making handshakes, we're giving interest surveys, we're trying to see who students are and how they're coming into the room. And then kind of leveraging those strengths into academic success, because sometimes, in the words of Nipsey Hussle, right, we're trying to tap into the genius, and sometimes that genius is not immediately visible. And sometimes that genius is not directly aligned to the content of the course. And so it's important that you kind of find where students do excel, so you can lean into that and leverage it. And so that's part of being kind of responsive to who they are. It's about creating critical thinkers. It's about building skills that are about critical thinking as well as content skills, and creating a community of learners so that learners know that students know that learning is the expectation, that growth is the expectation. And so if you're out there and you want to think about these questions for a moment, think about what are the cultures in your rooms. So of course, every period is different, every class is different, every year is different, every grade level is different. And so you do want to think about, if I'm going to be responsive, right? If my instruction is going to be relevant, I have to know who it's relevant to, who it's responsive to. And so I want to talk about culture in a few ways in a moment, but just think off the top of your head, what are the cultures that come into your room every day? Who are those things? And think beyond race, think beyond physical, right? Cultures based on physical, but think about the familial culture, about what students have at home, what they share, what they don't share. Think about all of those things. And then another thing about creating a culture of learning is thinking about who's setting the goals and who's creating the vision. And so if you're really trying to create a community in your classroom, that has to be a student engaged kind of not even activity, but practice. So not only a student as much as possible, because if I'm a student, I want to come in and know that I'm being supported in doing what I have decided that I want to do, right? So definitely a teacher supported goal, because we don't want to say, oh, well, I'm really dumb and I don't get this, so my goal is to, get a 1.5 on the AP exam. But know that there's some thought that's been put in on the part of students that they are thinking about, what do I want to get from this course? And create a collective vision about what students will do in that room at that time, what they're bringing in and what they commit to constantly bringing in. So, for example, we, the students of 5th period AP Lit, commit to bringing our authentic selves and being transparent about our struggles, naming our needs, and doing our homework, right? So that's kind of the vision. And so in doing that, in committing to do that, we have a 90% 3 and above in the course, and get that down. And so then you've created a culture in your classroom, and they're working toward achieving that. And it feels like their community. And so when they walk in, 5th period's culture is different than 4th period's culture is different than 1st period's culture, but they all have a vision that they're moving toward. And that's really important in creating that academic success, because you're able to leverage that. This is your goal. We're still working here. And so it helps students to understand that they're not walking in ready, right? That there are benchmarks to pass, benchmarks to conquer, and learning to be done on everyone's part. So think about who they are and what they're bringing, and then how you can leverage that, and what they can commit to bringing daily. So the second criteria is cultural competence, and I kind of call that building awareness, because this is when it gets really important to know who's in your classroom. And so it's really easy to decide, because I think one of the greatest misconceptions about culturally relevant pedagogy is that it's for insert euphemism. It's for urban kids, or it's for disadvantaged kids, or it's for under-resourced kids. And under-supported, right, in their classrooms, and ignored for what they do bring to the room. And so it's important that everyone be competent. So not only that teachers know who's in the classroom, but students know who each other are. And so sometimes you have to be very transparent about breaking those stereotypes, breaking those assumptions, and trying not to say, oh, I know because you are of this culture, you will think this way, or you will work this hard, or not, or your parent will be this involved or not involved. Obviously, we want to stay away from those kinds of assumptions, but also let students tell you what they do come from. Again, thinking about what their expectations are from home, about education and about learning, whether education is valued is a very different question than whether or not education is privileged. And that's also a different conversation than whether or not education is prioritized. And so all of these things are important to know what your students are going home to, and then what they're bringing in with them. And so I had a very insightful conversation about kind of the legacy of literacy, and how there are multiple racial and ethnic groups, not to mention socioeconomic classes, where literacy has been not only discouraged, but illegal for years, right? And so if you are someone who has had the privilege of literacy in your family for years and years, then you're coming in with a different understanding of what literacy does for a person, and what that legacy could be, than for someone who is, 2 generations away from literacy being not an option, not an opportunity. And so things like that you have to, consider. So when you're looking at your students, don't make those assumptions. Have those conversations and acknowledge where the privilege is, and how we can be critical about it, and how that group of students is going to move through it, right, in order to be successful. So as much as possible, right, you're responding to these cultures, you're asking the students what they bring, what they've experienced, who they are. And this is not, kumbaya, right, every day, but it is thinking about how students can discuss. What role is it really that discussion is playing? Are you trying to get students to toss around ideas in order to get to the right one? Are you asking for students to bring all of their analysis, all of their understandings to the table and sort through to see what makes sense and what can be supported? Or are you, do you have, right, are you holding kind of the end result of the discussion in your expert hand? So I think I'm a literature teacher and it gets tough sometimes. It's like, nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. But to think about how moving through the wrong, right, answers can get students, can invest students in finding the right answer. And so thinking about what is the role of discussion. So not only what is the product of the discussion, but what is it that you want discussions to do? Who is it that you want discussions to work most strongly for? And what have they been told about their ideas? What have they been told culturally, familially, or just societally about the importance and impact and even relevance of their ideas? And so if you're asking someone who has been told directly and indirectly that their ideas don't matter, there's a lot of work there to be done in order to create a community where that person feels not only safe but supported, and that those students feel as though they can come to the discussion, and they might not be where everyone else is, but they're going to get it because there's a community that supports them. So also thinking about how students engage with language. I think that's something that's very important for AP literature. Not making assumptions about their abilities. Also not making assumptions on their writing abilities based on their oral expression. I think that's something that's very, thinking about how you can, again, how you can leverage what their strengths actually are. I've taught in urban schools my entire career, and some teachers are constantly surprised by the expression of an insightful idea in language that's not sophisticated. And I think that shouldn't be a surprise, right? We should expect that all students are growing and bringing their best. And so if that's a concept, right, that you need to be addressing, thinking about when are they asked to code switch? What are they speaking in my room? When are they not able to speak? When are their expressions valued? What expressions are valued? And finding all of these things out. And I think the easiest way to find out is to ask. And so in order to be responsive, you have to be responsive, right? That's a paradox, I guess, a conundrum, or just repetition. But in order to actually respond, you have to have something that you're responding to. So again, I think one thing that's really, really important is that first question to ponder about the role of discussion in your classroom and what it is that you expect discussion to create, what it is that you expect discussion to do, right? Why you're having them, when you're having them, and what you're having them, what the topics are. And so then that kind of leads to this idea of critical consciousness. I think this is the biggest, heaviest criterion, and that is knowing that you are trying to create citizen thinkers, that you're trying to create critical thinkers. And so I feel, I get a little elitist about teachers. I think sometimes my small brain, my petty brain, thinks that there's a hierarchy. And I think that we are, as English teachers, often far more invested in creating critical thinkers than some other disciplines may lend themselves. I'll say that. So not that we care more that they are critical thinkers, but that we spend more time supporting that growth. But it's really important to be transparent about that you have opportunities for metacognition, that you're having students think about how they got to the conclusion that they're putting. Like if they're making a literary argument, obviously that's going to be text-based, right? And so constantly thinking about how you get to your thoughts. And so we have Pedagogy of Oppression and Teaching to Transgress, these greats. If you haven't read them, Paulo Freire and Bell Hooks, I definitely would recommend that, right? Just diving in. But I think just overall knowing that you are putting, especially with AP Lit, which is usually a senior course, right? You're about to put students out into the world, and that you really want them to be able to think critically about the world around them. You want to prepare them to engage with their world in a critical way. And so I think a lot of us do spend some time talking about critical theory. We spend some time thinking about how writers have been received through the years. Even if we are teaching, that kind of classic canon, we're looking at it through some lenses that don't necessarily laud them the way that they always have been. And that's really important. I think that's one of the most basic ways in AP Lit to get to this idea. There's also this idea of disrupt text. And so if you're not following that, I would, just look on Twitter. There's also a disrupt text website. That's tough to say. Disrupt Text's website, where they're just talking about not only disrupt, right, status quo, but also how to teach the canonical text more disruptively. And so you are asking students to create their own critique and build knowledge around. And so the ideas here are whether or not you are imposing your own critique on students. So that goes back to that idea about discussion, about whether or not you're trying to get them to discuss until they get to your answer. Or you are open to them coming up with an interpretation that you never had, and valuing that, and taking it with you as though it were yours, as though it were your plan. And so if you're thinking about meaning of the work as a whole, that you're considering the actual meaning of that work to an 18-year-old student, a 17-year-old student, a 14-year-old student, right? That you're not just thinking about what is the theme, but that you are applying the true critical, practical, right? As much as practical as possible. And so obviously we know that when you're trying to think about meaning of work as a whole, you're not stopping at a cliche like love is blind, but pushing that toward the kinds of blindness that love or infatuation or lust would create in a person, and what kind of actions and behaviors they might take as a result. And so think about why you teach what you do. Like, do you teach it because it's your favorite? Do you teach it because you think that it's really going to help students think about life? Do you teach it because you think that it's going to help them navigate and become critical citizen thinkers? Or do you teach it because you have to, right? And then that's a whole other thought that we can talk about in a moment. But why do you teach the titles that you teach? And what, again, do you expect for students to get from that, as opposed to kind of what you can give to them? What do you expect them to be able to explore and find? So those are the three bottom foundational criteria, that you're creating thinkers, that you have a collective academic culture of achievement, and that you are creating a cultural competence that you have for yourself and that you're teaching from a cultural competence. So I want to talk really quickly about what it's not. So this might be a little controversial. I don't know. But first of all, it's not reading blank books. Whichever blank is that the culture is that you think you're trying to target, respond to, right? It's not reading more LGBTQ books. It's not reading more Black books. It's not reading more Latino books, because those are the students that you have in front of you. It's not reading more books by certain kinds of authors necessarily. It's more about what you're doing with the books and what you're trying to get, what you're trying to create, how it fits into the culture that you're creating, and how it pushes students to think against or inside or around that text. It's not cultural appropriation. It's not mocking or stereotypes. It's not figuring out how you can show students that you share a culture with them, because you might not, right? Except for the culture that you're creating, right? The community that you're creating is going to be the foundational kind of competence in your room. And so it's not saying, hey, I get you, so much as it's saying, hey, I see you. I acknowledge that you're here. And sometimes that feels a little fuzzy, and a little bit not like concrete skills. And so again, I don't think that it's something that you want to necessarily, you want to not create activities, but imbue activities, if that makes sense. So you want it to be a running thread, that students are seen, that students are valued, that students are heard, that students have more to contribute than maybe they have thought that they have. They have as much to contribute maybe as you do, and that they will learn from each other as well as learning from you. And so it doesn't mean that you have to have all your projects be dances, even if some of your students are part of a dance culture, right? So this is the thing. We're not assuming where students are coming from. We're actually asking and responding to the feedback that they give. It's not warm and fuzzy instead of rigorous. It's not that you are giving kids hugs and saying, hey, I understand who you are and who you're trying to be. Although that never hurts, right? I want a hug and somebody to tell me that they see me. But it's not only that. It's wrapping the steel maybe in a knit case occasionally, but it doesn't mean that the knife is not there, that the work is not sharp, that you're not expecting, that you're not setting that bar high, right? It's just that maybe when you knock your head against the bar the first couple of times, it feels a little softer, because you feel as though it is a bar that you have set for yourself as a student. Because students feel like, I knew this bar was here, I'm trying to get here. And if I'm knocking my head against it, that means that I'm getting closer to hurdling over it. So that's awesome, right? So that's what you want. It doesn't mean that you are always having them land on a, soft feather mattress instead of learning. It means that sometimes the learning feels like a soft feather mattress because they're so excited about it, that even the tough stuff feels worth it because they wanted to do it. And it's not social emotional learning. That's a whole other thing, right? So this is not saying like, it's teaching to who they are, but leveraging that to create academic success, excuse me. So that's really important. And so I've been kind of using this word culture, and there are sometimes assumptions about what that is, but I just want you to think for a moment about all the cultures that you're a part of, and this is not all of them, right? And so we have, these rings don't necessarily go in order. They might for someone, but there are always levels of culture in which you engage at different times and throughout a day, throughout a week, throughout your life. And so I think it's important to know that all of these are what students are bringing into the classroom, and any of them are what you could be responding to. And so it doesn't mean that, oh, I've got some kids that identify with a sexual orientation different than mine, so I'm going to push into that. It also doesn't mean that I am the minority, and so I'm going to show them everything they need to know about this group that is not present in the room. It means that you are understanding what they're bringing and what that means to them, right? So national culture means different things to different nationalities, obviously, and how they navigate America, whether that's that's where we're from or not. Like all of that, they're bringing into the room. They're bringing it into the room, and you want to acknowledge that and say, okay, what does this look like? If we're reading about America, you are American, right? If that's your national identity, then what does that look like? If you're not, what does that look like? How does this play into what you do or know or say, right? And so thinking about all of these things that you could be reaching at any given time, and that not everybody's going to be, the idea is that everyone sees themselves in wherever you are. And so I think that's a common misconception about texts, right? That you need to, that it has to be a mirror when it could be a window, it could be a door, right? And so thinking about that, and so thinking about all of these things and how you intersect and interact in parallel, all of your students and how they do those things with each other in these rings, right? So you probably don't share an age culture with your students. And so that's a thing, right? But they do. They are, you know, in a group, whatever that generation is called right now. And you are whatever generation yours is called. And so that's something to think about. And so what does that mean for the way that they can see? What does that mean for the way that you can speak? What does that mean for the intersection that's going to come in the room? And also, of course, acknowledging the intersectionality of all of these cultures. And so you could, a student could, or you could yourself as a teacher, be kind of on the oppressed side of all of these ideas. All, you know, you could be part of multiple dominant cultures. You could be part of multiple oppressed and suppressed cultures. You could be a mix. And so it's important, again, it's important that you're kind of taking all of this in and having these conversations so that everyone's bringing what they have to the room. So thinking about how this plays out in the actual classroom. I saw this quote on Twitter, and it says, "If we showed our syllabi to our most revered freedom fighters, talked with them about our goals, projects, readings, theories of change, would they see their liberatory work in our teaching?" And so I think at the base of all understandings, if you have freedom fighters in your life that you revere, dead, alive, working, writing, thriving, or past, how does that play out in your pedagogy? Like, how do you bring those freedom fighters to your classroom? And are they represented? Do you leave those? Do you leave the people and concepts that you revere? Do you leave them outside of the conversation? And so I think if you do, and it's not because you have been reprimanded for not, then think about how you can bring more liberatory work into your classroom, liberatory as you understand it, right? And then just the idea that certain concepts are liberatory, period. And so think about the people that you respect, the ideals that you support, and where those belong, and then ask, like, where does this sit with you, students? Is this something you're thinking about? Is it something you're not? And sometimes, you know, I've had classes full of really astute political thinkers. I've had classes of students who had never been asked to think about themselves in kind of a socio-political reality. And some wanted to and some did not. And so obviously you want to know where students are and what the conversations that you can have. And so the last thing is just to think about how this looks. And so I have these kind of 4 components, right, of how this can be practical in your classroom. It looks like students being able to be experts. And so again, if you are trying to leverage genius, untapped genius, if you're trying to create experts, if you're trying to respect students' aptitude, then you're going to allow them to be experts. And sometimes that means that you're going to give them some expertise, you're going to give them some background, and they're going to be able to play the role as an expert. And sometimes it means that you actually don't know as much as they do about something. And so you're allowing them to be teachers to you and to their classmates as much as possible. And that, again, creates investment, because they say, when I go to AP Lit, I'm seen and I'm heard and I'm allowed to bring what I have. And I'm allowed to, you know, my teacher kind of is working on the alchemy to turn what I have into what I need. And so it means, you know, activating prior knowledge. It means building background for texts. It means diving into texts where they were written, right, and thinking about setting there, as well as setting of the text. And it means allowing students to deliver instruction. It means asking students what they can deliver. There's a writer by the name of Christopher Emdin, and he wrote a book called For White Folks Who Teach in the Hood, and the rest of y'all too. And even if that's not you, if you're the rest of y'all, that's okay. But it's really about the same idea about being responsive and open to the cultures that students are teaching and allowing them to teach as well. And so he has the idea of co-teaching, that students can be experts in content as well, that they should be allowed to show what they know and what they've learned, and that you don't always have to be saved on the stage, right? That you could allow them to explore a concept on their own level and teach their classmates. Also the idea that your classroom is a community. I talked before about creating a vision, about supporting that vision, about having students create goals, but also knowing that students having a practice of students kind of creating knowledge for themselves before they are expected to deliver it to you. And so that's something to think about, because obviously we teach a course that does have a test, and you're taking that test by yourself. And so there are a lot of kind of conversations about cooperative learning and whether or not it supports students. And I argue that it always does. I argue that no matter how you've decided to create small communities within your classroom, that students can benefit from, and that there are students who have a reticence that is based in not a lack of preparation, but a lack of confidence. And if they're allowed to kind of test their ideas with students, that especially before, as they learn to trust and respect you, which we know happens, it's fine if they're teenagers. But if they're allowed to test their ideas with students and talk about the homework, or, peer edit an essay, that builds their engagement and their investment in the course, and it builds their understanding of their growth. And so not only their understanding of their growth, but their commitment to their growth. And so that's something to think about having. We all know about, turn and talk and think, pair, share, and having things that are that spontaneous, but also things that are more structured, like knowing we're about to have a Socratic seminar. You're going to talk about your responses to these questions. You're going to create questions in a small group first. And it allows students to kind of gather themselves and bring their best selves to the conversation, and also know that there are people on whom they can rely in that room, and that the culture has been created that we're not only achieving, we're accountable, and that we're going to build knowledge, like literally come with different materials from different places and build a house that we all want to live in. And so kind of crossing those two ideas, student as expert and classroom as community, like a class-led review of things, right? That again, you can be a part sometimes, and instead of being the leader. And it's obviously if it's something that you try to infuse into your classroom, it can be amazing to say, oh, yeah, right. They know these things, and mostly because you taught them, right? But you're teaching them how to think as opposed to, or you're guiding their thinking as opposed to guiding their answers, right? Guiding their thinking as opposed to guiding their thoughts. And so that's awesome. And so then that puts you in a position as a mentor, again, for how to think, how to read, and how to navigate the world of novels, and how to navigate their own world. Because I think that that's what success in a classroom looks like, when you created students who think differently, right? Or Apple think different, either one, right? Or both. And that you have built thematic connections, that if you don't have an opportunity to teach disruptive texts, that disruptively, right, that you are teaching students to interrogate everything, that you are showing them how to respond when they do interrogate and they're really disappointed or angry, at the answers, right? So there are classic novels that are super useful for AP literature analysis, AP level analysis, that weren't written for the students in your classrooms, right? And so thinking about how you interact with those as well. And again, reading disruptively, even if you're not reading something that has already been designed to disrupt. And that's powerful, right? It's powerful to say, for a student to be able to say, this is, I don't like this, or this talks about me in a certain way. And to teach them not just to say, well, it was written a long time ago, and so, give it some grace. That you think about your position in this world, and that in your position historically in every world, and thinking about how you're thinking. And so that's really a lot. I said a lot of words. Hopefully, if you'd like, you go back and look at the slides and kind of think about those questions that I had on each slide, and think about how you're responding to the cultures that you see in your room, and whether or not students are contributing. So so I'm going to answer it. Writing a thesis statement and a literary analysis essay. I don't know the ingredients or components for this thesis statement, since we are supposed to pick a pivotal moment. So it sounds like you have the pivotal moment prompt, right? So I think so there are a bunch of things. So first of all, I think that in a open response prompt, or now the literary argument prompt, one of the clearest ways to write about a text is beginning, middle, end. And so if you pick a pivotal moment, you're not necessarily writing overall about the beginning, middle, end, but before, during, and after this moment. And so the thesis statement is going to establish the moment, for sure. And then also establish the argument that you're making about the contribution of the moment to the meaning of the work as a whole. So the ingredients for that, for a literary argument, essay, thesis, are always going to be the concept from the prompt and its impact on the meaning of the work as a whole. So you would have both. So you would figure out what is the meaning of the work as a whole. And in that essay, in that thesis statement, you're going to establish the moment that you've chosen and how that impacted not only the person and that person's development, but also how that created the meaning of the work as a whole. Because really, theme is just resolution of conflict minus specific characters. So if this pivotal moment made someone mature, I always think of Catcher in the Rye with this, because that's what I have used with it. But if you're choosing a pivotal moment in Holden's life, obviously that was impactful for him. He went to the carousel and realized his life's purpose, but also kind of, if you take that more broadly, then how did that moment impact kind of the way that he looked at life, and how can it be taken as a statement on life? And so you want to make sure that you have included the moment itself, the impact on the character, and the contribution to the meaning of the work as a whole. So those of you, no problem. So those of you who lurked around and listened to me talk about critical, culturally relevant statements, thank you for being here, and please keep coming and keep learning and keep teaching. Thank you.